Those kids had some nerve. Just unwind, Dad. Savor your sunset years. Sunset years? More like corroded tin rusting away in a downpour. They pictured me in house shoes, dribbling on dot-to-dots. Meanwhile, Bessie, my '67 Mustang Fastback, hummed a siren song from her berth in the garage. Idleness is the soul's kryptonite. I grumbled, wrench in hand, cinching down Bessie's fuel line. The space swam with the tang of high octane and lubricant, a heady perfume eclipsing any fancy French cologne. Bessie, a scarlet queen in faded glory, was my sanctuary, my act of defiance, a raised fist to Father Time and those blasted AARP mailers. I scooted out from under the chassis, smearing grime on my already filthy overalls. My bones protested with a chorus of creaks, each pop a testament to my stubborn refusal to fade away. But the discomfort was a welcome burn, a tangible sign I was still in the game, still capable of bending metal to my whim. Retirement. The word left a chalky residue on my tongue. My kids, bless their naive hearts, assumed I'd be thrilled with blue plate specials and daytime drivel. They failed to grasp that my internal combustion engine hadn't even hit peak performance. My thoughts drifted back to Mancini's auto repair, the haven I'd erected from sweat and grit. 30 years of lacerated knuckles, irate customers, and the constant, beautiful cacophony of breathing engines being coaxed from the brink. I could still summon the ghost of burning rubber, the sting of welding fumes, the singular aroma of a finely tuned machine. It was another epoch then, a world of promises etched in handshakes and familiar faces. I recalled the day I snagged Tony, green from high school, but with axle grease already embedded under his fingernails. He was voracious for knowledge, a human sponge. "Show me everything, Mr. Mancini," he begged. And I did. I taught him to discern an engine's innermost secrets, to pinpoint trouble with the slightest waver in its rhythm. Now, Tony presided over the shop. He's amplified it, streamlined it, modernized it, so he tells me. Computers and diagnostic tools have usurped the practiced ear and informed hunch. Progress, they proclaim. I call it transformed. I relinquished the business 5 years prior, deluding myself that I crave some respite, a round of golf, some gentle gardening, all prevarications. The clubs languished in a corner, entombed in dust, and the only greenery I tended to was the faint algae bloom on Bessie's vent windows. The issue wasn't merely the absence of activity, it was the acute sensation of becoming antiquated, like a rotary dial in the digital age. My children treated me with a soft, coddling deference, as if I were a fragile heirloom liable to shatter at any jostle. "Dad, maybe you should enlist some help for the oil change on the Mustang," my daughter, Maria, cautioned during her last visit, her voice thick with concern. "You might lose your footing." "Lose my footing? I'd sooner meet my maker beneath Bessie's hood than topple over in a bingo parlor." That's when the epiphany struck, like a rogue spark igniting in the blackness. I wasn't primed for the pasture. I still harbored gasoline coursing through my veins and a wrench clutched in my fist. I wasn't about to stagnate and simply await the inevitable. Absolutely not. Joseph Mancini was re-entering the arena. But what shape would this venture take? Reopening Mancini's auto repair was out of the question. Tony was flourishing. Nor did I desire to be an encumbrance, leaning on dusty connections and a fading name. I yearned for something novel, something stimulating. The notion of a cigar emporium flickered for approximately 300 seconds. Too much bureaucracy, too much product on hand, and frankly, too much smoke. A handyman operation? Alluring. But I'd be locking horns with every amateur brandishing a toolbox and a dented pickup. Restoring classic cars, on the other hand, that held promise. I possessed an intrinsic grasp of automobiles. I understood their idiosyncrasies, their delicate areas, their latent majesty. I could distinguish a diamond in the rough from a country mile. Yet even that felt rote, too akin to what I'd always executed. I needed something to startle them, something to compel them to pay attention. Then it materialized. While perusing an online community fixated on vintage radios, Another of my preoccupations, refrain from inquiring. I unearthed a plea from a soul desperately seeking someone to mend his 1930s Philco. He'd contacted a multitude of shops but met with only dismissal. Too ancient, too convoluted, not worth the exertion, was the unanimous verdict. That's when the incandescent bulb illuminated. Vintage radios, restoring them, servicing them, resurrecting them from the dead. It constituted a specific niche, admittedly, yet a market nonetheless. And it integrated my passion for tinkering with my reverence for craftsmanship. Besides, it would send my kids into a complete tailspin. I chuckled to myself, picturing their expressions upon disclosing my intent to inaugurate a vintage radio repair enterprise. They'd likely stage an intervention. But that fueled me, the delectable savor of rebellion. The exhilaration of disproving their assessments. Of illustrating that age wasn't a hindrance, but an advantage. I possessed decades of expertise, a lifetime of cognizance, and a resolute refusal to be disregarded. The subsequent dawn found me awake before the sun, combing through eBay for fractured radios and antiquated electronics. I dedicated untold hours scrutinizing circuit diagrams, sourcing components, and converting the unused bedroom into a makeshift laboratory. My digits, gnarled and toughened from decades of clasping wrenches, now delicately manipulated minute wires and sensitive vacuum tubes. The aroma of soldering paste supplanted the fumes of gasoline, but the gratification remained constant. The opening weeks presented challenges. I blundered. I shattered components. I narrowly avoided electrocution more than once. But I gleaned knowledge from each misstep, honing my methods, augmenting my aptitude. I initiated modestly, publicizing my services on local online platforms and community notice boards. My initial clientele consisted predominantly of hobbyists and collectors, individuals who esteemed the intrinsic value of these bygone devices. The news diffused rapidly by word of mouth. Individuals were impressed by my acute attention to particulars, my devotion to excellence, and my unexpectedly fair rates. Before long, I was bombarded with requests. Radios arrived from across the state, each a singular puzzle, each a testament to an era long past. I even inaugurated a YouTube channel, chronicling my restoration endeavors and imparting my insights to the digital world. To my astonishment, it gained traction. People were captivated by the intricacies of these ancestral radios, by the artistry and ingenuity that underpinned their design. My offspring were bewildered. They struggled to comprehend why I was devoting so much time to this anachronistic hobby. They failed to perceive the latent possibilities, the prospects. They merely perceived a senescent man playing with dusty electronics. But I perceived something grander. I perceived a means to maintain relevance, to remain involved, to thrive. And, if candor reigned, I perceived a means to demonstrate their misjudgment. The watershed moment arrived when a regional museum approached me. They possessed a hoard of rare radios that had sustained damage in a deluge. They needed someone capable of restoring them to their prime condition. It was an immense undertaking, the most ambitious I'd ever undertaken. But I knew I possessed the aptitude. I assembled a small cohort of kindred spirits, and we dedicated months meticulously cleansing, mending, and refurbishing those radios. Upon the project's culmination, the museum director was euphoric. He lauded our achievement, hailing it as a marvel of restoration. The local media covered the narrative, and unexpectedly, Joseph Mancini, the retired auto mechanic, became a local luminary. The telephone commenced ringing incessantly. Collectors, museums, even celebrities were clamoring for my assistance. My modest vintage radio mending service had detonated. I reclined in my workshop, enveloped by the reassuring illumination emitted by vacuum tubes, and tallied the figures. It was a welcome revelation. I was generating more revenue now than I had during my tenure at Mancini's Auto Repair. More than Maria, the advocate, and even more than my son Anthony, the tech mogul. They visited for dinner a few weeks later, their countenances a blend of astonishment and reluctant admiration. "Dad, this is unreal," Maria declared, shaking her head. "I'm floored that you're prospering so significantly." "Yeah, Dad," Anthony echoed. "Perhaps you could impart some pointers." This digital sphere is savage. I leaned back in my chair, a slow grin unfurling across my visage. Retire? I inquired, sipping my coffee. I'm just beginning. They exchanged glances, a silent dialogue transiting between them. Then Maria spoke. So, regarding that estate planning, I chuckled. Some facets of existence remain constant. The intervention cruise. The Sunday sauce had barely begun its fragrant serenade when they launched their assault. I entered the kitchen, primed to coax its flavors and sizzle some meatballs, only to be confronted by my trio of offspring, looking less like loving children and more like a panel of judges about to deliver a harsh sentence. Martha, sweet woman, offered a look of commiseration from her post at the stove. A silent, sorry, etched on her face. Dad, we have to talk, Sarah proclaimed, her voice laced with that infuriating, I've got this confidence. She'd probably rehearsed the speech ad nauseum. About what, pray tell? I countered, already anticipating the subject. This wasn't a friendly chat about baseball stats. David, ever the peacemaker, chimed in. We're just a tad concerned, Dad. You've been consumed by your work. The way he said consumed, it sounded like a dangerous addiction. Elbow grease never hurt anyone. I shot back, grabbing a wooden spoon and stirring the simmering gravy with more force than necessary. The savory blend of garlic and oregano filled the air, a small act of rebellion against their preemptive scolding. Lisa, bless her bohemian heart, offered a gentler approach. Dad, we admire your passion for the radios, but it's quite an undertaking. You deserve to unwind, to savor your golden years. Unwind? Savor retirement? The words stung like a spray of ice water. I was finally engaged in something meaningful, not just killing time with daytime TV and dreading my next doctor's appointment. Sarah cleared her throat, then with a theatrical gesture, pushed a slick brochure across the checkered tabletop. We thought you might appreciate this. A cruise. A blasted cruise. Swaying palms, cerulean seas, and grinning retirees in matching floral shirts. It resembled an infomercial for a floating nursing home, garnished with sugary cocktails. A cruise, you say? I asked, my tone clipped. Yes, Dad, just picture it. Zero obligations, endless buffets, shuffleboard championships. Sarah gushed, plainly envisioning me contentedly confined to this aquatic geriatrics ward. David reinforced, a prime opportunity to de-stress, disconnect from the workshop. Perhaps, Lisa added sweetly, consider streamlining a bit? Maybe parting ways with the Mustang? It's quite a responsibility to keep up. That was the tipping point. They were trying to defang me. Steal my drive, my joy, and my damn machine. So, allow me to be clear, I enunciated, setting down the spoon and fixing them with a pointed stare. You believe I'm too ancient, too feeble to pursue my passion? You want me to liquidate my Mustang, my crowning achievement, and while away my days playing geriatric games on a glorified barge? Silence descended, thick enough to spread on toast, broken only by the gentle gurgle of the gravy. Martha wisely remained silent. Sarah, ever the diplomat, attempted to retreat. Dad, that's not what we meant at all. We simply want you to be healthy and content. Healthy and content? I scoffed. I'm more alive now than I've been in decades. This isn't about my well-being. It's about your discomfort with me refusing to conform to your preconceived notions of a retired geezer. I shoved the brochure back. Enjoy your cruise. I have radios to resurrect and a Mustang to maintain. I pivoted and exited the kitchen, my blood pressure rising faster than the gravy's temperature. As I marched toward the garage, I could hear their murmurs, a low chorus of disappointment and worry. Let them fret. An idea was sparking, a plan to showcase exactly what this old man could accomplish. Revenge, as they say, is a delicacy best savored with a soldering gun and a flawlessly restored console radio. Sunrise found me awake and energized, not for geriatric games, but for enterprise. I'd spent a restless night, a blend of indignation and inspiration churning within me. The cruise flyer lay crumpled on the table, a testament to their misguided intervention. My intention was straightforward, to prove them spectacularly mistaken. To demonstrate I was no decrepit relic ready for pasture. I was Joe Mancini, by God, and I still had fire in my belly. The first step was expansion. The garage was bursting at the seams, and my online footprint was negligible. Reliance on word of mouth and local ads was fine for a pastime, but not an enterprise. I dedicated the early hours to studying online marketing, a terrain as unfamiliar as astrophysics, SEO, algorithms, engagement. It sounded like utter nonsense. But I wasn't one to cower from a challenge. If these young bloods could amass fortunes with their devices, I could master the art of online radio sales. I discovered a local college offered a course on digital commerce for small businesses. A long shot, but I enrolled nonetheless. At the very least, I could learn enough to avoid getting swindled by some fast-talking ad firm. The class was teeming with individuals young enough to be my grandchildren, all furiously typing and banding about terms I barely understood. I was a relic in a digital jungle. Undeterred, I persevered, posed questions, and gradually, painstakingly, began assembling the puzzle. Simultaneously, I redoubled my efforts on the radio repairs. I haunted estate sales and flea markets for vintage machines, purchasing them at bargain prices and hauling them back to the garage. Hours evaporated as I meticulously revived these obsolete treasures. Whispers turned to shouts, and soon, I was fielding calls from collectors across the state. My reputation as a virtuoso restorer blossomed, as did my finances. One afternoon, a local news reporter arrived to chronicle my unconventional venture. They interviewed me about my fervor for antique radios, my opposition to ageism, and my ambitions for the future. The story rocketed through the internet, transforming me into a sudden sensation. Orders poured in from across the nation. People were shipping their cherished radios from distant locales. My humble garage metamorphosed into a humming restoration hub, overflowing with radios and components. I recruited assistants, a pair of retired engineers with a matching passion for vintage electronics. We labored relentlessly, fueled by caffeine and the gratification of breathing new life into these discarded marvels. I began to track my revenue, solely to monitor progress. The figures were astounding. I was earning more now than during my entire career as a mechanic. And more than just making a buck, I was making a contribution. I was safeguarding our heritage, one radio at a time. One evening, Sarah, David, and Lisa gathered for supper. They appeared subdued, even tentative. Their gazes followed me as I moved through the kitchen, preparing the meal. "Dad," Sarah began, cutting through the quiet, "we saw the news story." I simply nodded, stirring the simmering sauce. "It's remarkable," David conceded, a note of admiration creeping into his tone. Lisa, the eternal optimist, practically radiated pride. "Dad, you're incredible. You're like a bona fide superhero." I turned to face them, a trace of amusement tugging at my lips. "So, what do you think? Am I ready for that cruise just yet?" They shook their heads in unison, their expressions a blend of bewilderment, respect, and perhaps a hint of envy. "Dad," Sarah confessed, "we were wrong. You don't need a cruise. You're realizing your ambition." "And," Lisa chimed in, "you're probably raking in more dough than all of us combined." I chuckled. "Perhaps, but that's not the point. The point is, I'm immersed in something I cherish, and I excel at it." I spooned the gravy over a mound of linguine and presented it to Sarah. "Eat up, and next time, before you attempt to dictate the course of my life, remember this." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Retire? I'm just getting started." The radio whisperer. The ancient machine coughed and shuddered, its screen a jittering constellation of failing pixels. My knuckles, maps of age and experience, tapped across the keys, each strike a defiant echo against the chorus of retirement's beckoning. Rest, they'd prescribed. A sun-soaked cruise, they'd chirped, as if the tang of ozone could ever rival the lure of a circuit board. Poppycock. Joe Mancini wasn't about to fritter away his sunset years in idle pastimes. He wasn't finished writing his story just yet. The internet, though, remained a formidable challenge. My well-meaning offspring viewed me as a relic, barely capable of operating the television. Undeterred, I intended to prove them spectacularly wrong. Eldercare business opportunities. I pecked, then grimaced as the search engine disgorged a flood of promises that gleamed like fool's gold. Still, I pressed on, cutting through the thicket of dubious schemes until a flicker of inspiration caught my eye. Restoring vintage radios. Now, that held promise. A tangible craft. It thrummed with the memory of glowing filaments and crackling speakers, the soundtrack of my youth. Those weren't mere appliances back then. They were portals, mahogany boxes that carried the world into our cramped apartment. I recalled gathering around our Philco Cathedral with family, captivated by FDR's comforting voice, the Lone Ranger's daring feats, and the chilling drama of The Shadow. The warm scent of the tubes and the soft glow of the dial. It was magic incarnate, and I possessed the skill to resurrect them. I'd been immersed in the world of radio repair since childhood, apprenticed to my Uncle Sal, an electrical wizard capable of conjuring sparks from thin air. I could still taste the hours in his cluttered sanctuary, the heavy presence of solder fumes, as he illuminated the secrets of ohms and volts. The knowledge, slumbering in the recesses of my mind, waited to be awakened. "Martha!" I roared, pivoting in my groaning chair. My wife ambled into the room, worry etched on her face. "What's wrong, Joe? Are you all right?" "I've found it. The solution. The gateway to my triumphant return," I declared, my voice resonant with revived purpose. Martha's eyebrow arched skeptically. The gateway to what, exactly? More triumphant puttering in the garage? Far grander, Martha. I'm launching a business, restoring vintage radios. I'll sell them online. Her initial reaction was gentle amusement, an all too familiar expression. It mirrored the look she'd bestowed upon my attempt to fashion a perpetual motion machine from washing machine components. "Vintage radios, Joe? You haven't touched one of those in ages." "Irrelevant. It's like riding a bike, Martha. Moreover, I've done my research. There's a genuine demand for this stuff. Collectors, nostalgia, enthusiasts. Those who value genuine craftsmanship." "Genuine craftsmanship from a man who clings to a rotary phone?" she retorted, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "Hey, rotary phones are dependable. No batteries required and certainly no incessant updates," I countered, drawing myself up. Martha sighed, but a nascent hope flickered in her eyes. She understood I needed this. It wasn't merely about defying my children. It was about challenging the encroaching shadow of age. "All right, Joe," she conceded, her tone softening. "Let's assume, theoretically, that you're serious. Where does one even begin?" "That's the brilliance of the internet, Martha. I can source components, manuals, schematics, everything. I'll establish a website, capture some photographs. The whole kit and caboodle." "A website, really? Are you familiar with that process?" I hesitated, momentarily deflated. Website design wasn't exactly my forte. "Well, no, but I'm a fast learner. I'll peruse tutorials, review guides. Consider me a student once more." I fibbed, my confidence momentarily shaken. But Martha, ever supportive, ignored my small falsehood. "All right, Joe, I'll support you. However, promise me you won't deplete our savings on vacuum tubes." "Vacuum tubes are an investment, Martha. An investment in the future, the past, whatever," I proclaimed, seizing her hand and giving it a firm squeeze. "You won't regret this, Martha. Just wait and see. I'm going to be the radio whisperer." She chuckled, shaking her head. "The radio whisperer? Really, Joe?" "Hey, it's catchy, isn't it? Besides, it perfectly describes my mission. I intend to breathe life back into these antiquated sets, one vacuum tube at a time. I'm going to demonstrate to the world that seasoned folks can still master new skills, and I'm going to prove to my children that retirement isn't an end, but a commencement." The subsequent weeks were a frenetic blur. I transformed the garage into a workshop, methodically organizing my equipment, amassing dust-laden radios from swap meets and curio shops, and absorbing every article and video related to website construction. I even enlisted the assistance of my grandson, Michael, a college student whose expertise with computers dwarfed my knowledge of carburetors. He rolled his eyes at my vintage gear, but patiently guided me through the fundamentals of HTML and WordPress. Martha, with her inherent practicality, managed the finances and prevented me from plunging into insolvency. She also ensured I maintained regular meals and took periodic breaks, reminding me that even a radio whisperer required sustenance and rest. Progress was incremental at first. My website resembled a cave painting, and my initial radio sales barely covered the cost of materials. But I persevered, fueled by sheer grit and a burning desire to validate myself. I honed my techniques, refined my website, and gradually began to cultivate a solid reputation. I became renowned for my meticulous restorations, reasonable rates, and comprehensive knowledge of classic radios. People began to address me as the Radio Whisperer, just as I had predicted. And, damn it, the moniker was a delightful affirmation. Garage Mahal. From chaos to relative order. Retire and relax, they chirped, as if my gray matter was a clunker fit only for the scrap heap. Poppycock! My engine was just revving up. Martha, dear woman, simply patted my hand, that familiar Joe's being Joe smile gracing her lips. Priority 1, a proper workspace. The garage. More accurately, a shrine to abandoned dreams and ill-advised purchases. I jokingly dubbed it Garajahala over the years, a testament to the sheer volume of forgotten possessions within. Martha's sedan hadn't graced its threshold since '98, a promise of a rose trellis acting as the only inducement. Said trellis, like so many projects interred within, remained perpetually unfinished. Joe, are you absolutely certain about this? Martha queried, her tone carrying the concern usually reserved for orphaned kittens and temperamental meringues. She leaned against the doorway, arms folded, surveying the mountainous landscape of cast-off lawn furniture, aged tax documents, and enough corroded implements to outfit a platoon. Positive as the sunrise, Martha. Time to clear the decks before launching this new venture. I seized a spade, might as well start monumentally, and attacked a particularly egregious pile of deteriorating plastic sheeting. And just what venture might that be? An eyebrow arched, a clear indication she knew perfectly well, and was simply waiting for me to stumble. The Radio Whisperer. That's the moniker. Restoring antique radios, selling them online. I straightened a bit. It resonated with potential, even to my own ears. Martha exhaled softly. Radios, Joe? You haven't laid a hand on a radio since, well, the advent of that infernal television? Precisely. A sacrilege against true craftsmanship. These newfangled gadgets, devoid of soul. Now, lend a hand with this confounded outboard motor. The ensuing 3 days dissolved into a whirlwind of swirling dust motes, tenacious cobwebs, and the rusty lamentations of reluctant metal. I unearthed long-forgotten treasures. A pristine Lionel train set. The grandkids would adore it. A set of golf clubs, a testament to unrealized aspirations, and a trove of lumber sufficient for a modest cabin, someday perhaps. Martha joined the fray, sorting, cataloging, and occasionally murmuring under her breath about the sheer tonnage of obsolete paraphernalia I'd amassed. Joe, you're never going to use this contraption, she'd declare, brandishing a time-worn horseshoe or a dilapidated birdhouse. Perhaps not, I'd retort, but someone will. Everything holds purpose, Martha. One simply needs to unearth it. By the close of day 3, Garajahala was improved. Patches of bare concrete were visible. Martha even coaxed her car inside, extracting a promise to relocate the mountain of spare tires first. The subsequent task, procuring the raw materials. Radios were required. Fractured, dusty, neglected radios. That meant venturing into the realm of flea markets. I hadn't set foot in a flea market in ages. The last time, I believe, was a quest for a Halloween costume for the children. But I reasoned vintage radios would be languishing in garages and basements, mirroring my own situation, patiently awaiting rediscovery. My chosen venue, the Bargain Bonanza Bazaar, unfolded as a sprawling chaos of mismatched tables, sun-bleached canopies and bargain hunters, sporting eyes gleaming with acquisitive fervor. The air hung heavy with the aroma of day-old popcorn, budget perfume, and the subtle metallic bite of oxidizing iron. I plunged into the throng, my gaze sweeping the displays for the telltale signs of vacuum tubes and Bakelite. Mountains of Beanie Babies, legions of porcelain dolls with unsettlingly vacant expressions, and enough Elvis artifacts to populate a Graceland annex. Yet, radios remained elusive. Then, nestled deep within a shadowed corner, obscured by a table laden with dubious kitchen utensils, I spotted it. A Philco Cathedral radio, its wooden casing marred and coated in dust, yet its potential shone through like a guiding star. "What's the damage on the Philco?" I inquired of the vendor, a lanky youth with a greasy braid and an air of profound apathy. 50 clams, he mumbled, scarcely lifting his eyes from his phone. $50, practically a giveaway. 50? Son, this relic looks like it survived a cataclysm. 25? Cold, hard cash. The kid shrugged. 35, final call. 30, I countered, extracting my wallet. And I'll take that rusty old table lamp too. $5 for the pair. Take it or leave it. He hesitated, then sighed. Fine, just haul him out of here. I grinned, a surge of triumph welling up within me. My inaugural radio. My first reclaimed treasure. The next acquisition proved even more fruitful. An Emerson Tombstone radio, its dial face fractured, yet its inner workings intact. I bartered with an elderly woman who seemed to have been operating flea market stalls since the dawn of time. Starting at 75, I secured it for 40, and I even managed to snag a carton of vacuum tubes to sweeten the deal. As I hobbled back to the truck, the sun began its descent below the horizon. My limbs ached, my back protested, and my wallet felt decidedly lighter. Yet, I possessed 2 radios, a box overflowing with tubes, and a rekindled sense of purpose. Martha awaited my return in the driveway, her countenance a blend of relief and mild exasperation. "Joe, you're back! I was starting to get concerned. And what in the world is all this?" She gestured towards the radios nestled in the truck bed. "Treasure, Martha, utter treasure. The radio whisperer is officially open for business." She shook her head, but a flicker of a smile betrayed her amusement. "Just don't bring any more of that debris into the house, Joe. The garage is overflowing as it is." I chuckled. "Don't fret, Martha. I'm merely getting underway." Sparks, shocks, and screaming dials. "Relax and enjoy retirement," they said, as if my brain was turning to mush and my hands were suddenly too shaky to hold a wrench. My kids, bless their hearts, they meant well. But sitting on the porch watching the grass grow? That ain't living, that's waiting, and Joe Mancini doesn't wait. So, I decided to show them. Show them that this old dog still had a few tricks, and maybe even teach them a thing or two about hustle, flipping radios. That was the ticket. Nostalgia was in, and I knew those old sets like the back of my hand. More than I knew the back of my own hand these days, probably. The first radio, a Philco Cathedral, was a beast. Looked beautiful, all arched wood and yellowed fabric, but inside it was a rat's nest of frayed wires and crumbling components. I figured, what the hell, I've rebuilt engines that were in worse shape. Famous last words. I plugged it in after checking the plug wasn't a fire hazard, mind you. I'm not completely daft. And pop! The lights flickered. Martha yelled from the kitchen and the radio remained stubbornly silent. Just a faint smell of ozone hung in the air. "What was that, Joe?" Martha called. "Just testing the waters, dear," I yelled back, already reaching for the fuse box. "A little enthusiastic testing." The next day, I tried again. This time, I was armed with my ancient multimeter, probably older than my grandkids, and a healthy dose of caution. I poked around, muttered to myself, and even consulted a dog-eared schematic I'd found online. I replaced a couple of obviously dodgy capacitors, feeling a surge of satisfaction when I clipped them in. This was it, I thought. Victory. I flipped the switch. This time, no blown fuse. Instead, a high-pitched whine filled the garage, followed by a crackle, then nothing. I touched the chassis to ground myself, as any sensible mechanic would, and zap! A jolt shot up my arm, making my hair stand on end. "Jesus, Joe!" I yelped, clutching my arm. Martha came running in, her face a mask of concern. "Are you all right? What happened?" "Just a little static," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "These old things have a bit of a kick to 'em." She didn't look convinced. "Maybe you should just take it easy, Joe. This is a lot of work." "Easy, Martha, easy is for Sundays. I'm building an empire here," I declared, puffing out my chest. She just sighed and shook her head.
All right. Just be careful."
The Zenith was next, a beautiful console model with a built-in record player. This one, I figured, was a slam dunk. It looked mostly intact. Just needed a little cleaning and maybe a new coat of varnish. I started with the varnish. I'd always been a dab hand with a spray gun, but something went wrong. Maybe the nozzle was clogged, maybe I held it too close. I don't know. Whatever the reason, the finish came out all orange, peely, and uneven. It looked like a kindergartner had attacked it with a can of spray paint. I stared at it, horrified. "Well, that's just great," I muttered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying the day's disasters in my head. The blown fuse, the electric shock, the orange peel Zenith. Maybe my kids were right. Maybe I was too old for this. The next morning, Martha was unusually quiet. She just handed me a mug of coffee and a plate of toast without saying a word. As I was about to head out to the garage, she stopped me. "Joe," she said, "I got you something." She held out a small box. I opened it. Inside, nestled in foam, was a brand new digital multimeter. It had a bright, clear display, more settings than I knew what to do with, and even a little built-in flashlight. I looked at her, surprised. "Martha, you shouldn't have." "Don't be silly," she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "I figured you could use something more modern." I knew what she was really saying. She was saying she believed in me, that even though I was making a mess of things, she knew I could figure it out. And that little gesture, that quiet act of support, was all the motivation I needed. I spent the next few days buried in YouTube tutorials, learning about transistors, resistors, and all sorts of other electronic gubbins I'd never even heard of before. I watched videos on soldering techniques, troubleshooting circuits, and even how to properly apply varnish. It wasn't easy. My eyes strained, my fingers fumbled, and my brain felt like it was about to explode, but I kept at it. I unsoldered those awful capacitors, resoldered them with more care, and learned to read the schematic. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to understand what I was doing wrong. I learned that patience was key, that rushing things only led to mistakes. And I learned that even an old dog could learn new tricks, especially with a little help from his wife and the internet. A week later, I dared to plug the Philco back in. I held my breath, flipped the switch, and nothing. Silence. Then, a faint hum, followed by a crackle, and then music. Tinny, staticky, but undeniably music. It was an old big band tune, something from the 40s. I grinned. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And Joe Mancini was just getting warmed up. Cyber skeptic to forum fixture. "Put your feet up, Dad," Anthony chirped, his hand a little too familiar on my back, like I was some prized Pekingese primed for the Westminster show. "You've more than earned it." Earned it? I'd earned a lifetime of leisure thrice over. Retirement, though, tasted like a gilded cage, and all I craved was a shot at proving I wasn't ready to kick the bucket just yet. "Relaxation is a fool's errand," I growled, already halfway out the door, a battered Atwater Kent radio cradled in my arms. "These beauties won't fix themselves." Maria sighed, a sound I knew well. "Dad, you'll throw your back out." "Why not? Try lawn bowling." "Lawn bowling?" I'd rather tango with a badger. No, I needed the comforting weight of transformers, the warm glow of tubes, the tang of solder. Something to reassure me I wasn't just a museum piece. Martha, bless her heart, simply gave me a knowing wink. She knew my engine needed to rev. "Let him tinker, kids. Keeps his blood pumping." Ironically, it was the internet that fanned those flames. Anthony, ever the tech guru, created a profile for me on a vintage radio forum. "A place to find components, Dad," he said, like bestowing some great privilege. "Maybe get pointers?" Pointers? From whippersnappers who probably thought a capacitor was a brand of coffee? I scoffed, but signed up regardless. "Mancini's Vintage," my profile declared. My avatar. A shot of me, looking ornery but resolute, wielding a soldering iron like Excalibur. The forum was a sprawling digital bazaar of threads and abbreviations that were Greek to me. But a discussion on restoring Philco 41220s, the very model currently challenging my sanity, caught my eye. I dove in, detailing my time-honored technique for aligning if transformers, signal generator, trained ear, and a trusty screwdriver. The response? A lukewarm reception at best. "Lol, Grandpa still rocks a signal generator?" One user, TubeNoob69, posted. "Get with it, Pops. Spectrum Analyzer, FTW." "A Spectrum what's it?" Another chimed in. "Screwdriver? You'll butcher the slugs. Proper alignment tool or GTFO." My blood pressure spiked. I've been using a screwdriver for half a century, never ruined a slug, not once. I hammered back, my fingers relentless on the keys. "This ain't astrophysics, it's radio repair. You youngsters think you know it all, with your fancy gizmos." The thread detonated, insults ricocheted. I was branded a fossil, a technophobe, and worst of all, an analog codger. I stood my ground, stubbornly defending my time-tested methods. I knew my stuff. I'd coaxed more radios back to life than these kids had even seen. Martha discovered me simmering at the screen. "Joe, honey, maybe just ignore them." "Ignore them? They're saying I'm a has-been." "Well," she said gently, "maybe they have something to teach you." That smarted. Martha was usually my staunch defender, however absurd my stance. But she had a sliver of a point. I might have the fundamentals down, but technology had galloped ahead. Even I had to concede that that newfangled multimeter she'd bought me was pretty sharp. So, swallowing a dose of pride, I became a shadow, I observed. I devoured information. I deciphered spectrum analyzers, network analyzers, and software-defined radios. Gradually, understanding dawned. One day, a user was battling a persistent hum in his Philco. He'd tried everything, swapping out capacitors, verifying grounds, all to no avail. A memory surfaced, a similar conundrum I'd faced years ago. A hairline fracture in a resistor, concealed beneath a film of dust. Hesitantly, I typed, "Check route 12, near the rectifier tube. Inspect for faint cracks, they can be tough to spot." The user, Cap King, responded almost instantly. "Dude, you're a wizard. That was it. Cracked resistor. Legend." Suddenly, I was no longer just some analog codger. I was Mancini's Vintage, the guy who knew his onions. People started peppering me with inquiries, soliciting my wisdom. I generously shared my expertise, carefully elucidating my techniques, while also embracing the advancements. I even ventured into the realm of new tools. That spectrum analyzer? Remarkably handy, as it turned out. The network analyzer? A revelation for impedance matching. I learned, and I imparted knowledge. The forum transformed into my virtual clubhouse. I remained Mancini's Vintage, the curmudgeonly old mechanic. But now I was also Mancini's Vintage, the bridge between bygone eras and the digital age. One evening, Anthony paid a visit. "Hey, Pop," he began, looking somewhat abashed. "I saw you on that forum. You're kind of a rock star." "Kind of?" I beamed. "I'm practically a cyber deity." He chuckled. "Seriously, though, you've earned the respect of a lot of people." That felt damn good. More gratifying than any retirement shindig or commemorative timepiece. Business flourished. Word traveled. Radios arrived from all corners of the nation. I had a waiting list that stretched into the horizon. I even needed to enlist a part-time assistant, a bright young man named Kevin, who possessed a far greater grasp of computers than I ever would, but who was eager to absorb the ancient craft. One day, Martha was reconciling the accounts. She glanced up, Her eyes widened. "Joe," she announced, "you're earning more than Anthony and Maria combined." I unleashed a holler that rattled the windows. "Retire? I'm just hitting my stride." The kids gathered for Sunday supper. They were brimming with questions. How was I attracting so much business? What was my secret sauce? Was I really utilizing a spectrum analyzer? I simply grinned, a mischievous spark in my eyes. "Let's just say," I declared, "experience still counts for something." The lonely Philco's plea. The Philco radiated warmth under the harsh glare of the workshop lights. The walnut veneer practically hummed with renewed life. A week bled into its resurrection. Delicate surgery on frayed wires, meticulous cleansing of the chassis, a near-invisible graft where a chip had marred the cabinet. The damn thing surpassed its factory-fresh glory of 38. "All right, sweetheart," I murmured, buffing a smudge from the Bakelite dial. "Time to find your forever home." eBay. Michael nearly spat out his kale smoothie when I broached the subject. "Dad, you sure you know what you're doing? This ain't the classifieds." Meant well, I suppose, but the jab still smarted. Rebuilding a carburetor in the dark? Child's play. Mastering the internet couldn't be tougher than that. I'd even splurged on professional snapshots. Some kid, granddaughter's friend, a whiz with a digital camera, spent an hour wrestling with lighting and angles. Made the radio look like a priceless artifact. Cost a C-note, but I considered it a vital investment. Now, hunched over my relic of a computer, fingers tapping out the listing, I meticulously composed the ad. Vintage 1938 Philco radio, fully restored, mint condition, an authentic slice of Americana. I detailed every painstaking repair, each painstaking component, the sheer man-hours invested. I even tossed in a concise history of radio's golden age. The price was ambitious but fair, $350. A steal, given its pristine condition. David would have urged me to undercut the market, but I knew its true worth. This wasn't just an old radio, it was a tangible legacy, a piece of history reborn. Click. Listing live. The wait began. Day 1, the listing haunted me. 0 bids. Early days, I reasoned. People needed time. Day 2, I refreshed the page obsessively. Still 0. By day 3, anxiety coiled in my gut like a cold snake. Perhaps Michael was right. Maybe I was past this. Doubt crept in. Was the price too steep? Did anyone even give a damn about vintage radios anymore? Were they all lost in the hypnotic glow of their smartphones? Each dawn, I shuffled into the workshop. The Philco's unblinking silence, a constant, looming indictment. Its tubes, vibrant when energized, now seemed dull, mirroring my own waning spirit. One afternoon, Maria found me mesmerized by the eBay page, my face illuminated by the screen's cold light. That bid box remained a desolate 0. "Joe," she said softly, her hand gentle on my shoulder, "don't let this get to you. It's only been a few days." "A few days is a lifetime in the online bazaar, Maria," I grumbled, hitting refresh yet again. "Nobody's biting." She squeezed my shoulder. "They will. It's a beauty, and you worked wonders. Just be patient, darling." Easy for her to preach calm. She hadn't poured her sweat and passion into this project, hadn't breathed new life into a forgotten relic. She wasn't staring into the abyss of obsolescence. Sleep remained distant that night. My thoughts were a chaotic replay of every restoration detail, hunting for imperfection. Had I erred somewhere? Was a connection imperfect? Sound quality less than pure? The house resonated with silence, punctuated only by the grandfather clock in the hall. Each tick was a metronome counting down, a stark reminder of time's relentless march, of my own fading time. Staring at the darkened ceiling, a forgotten sensation stirred. Insecurity. It felt like a chilling draft, whispering nasty things. "You're past it, Joe. Nobody cares about your hobbies. Just accept it." I thrashed and turned, trying to shake off the bleakness, but it clung like a second skin. Around 4, exhaustion finally pulled me under, into a restless sleep filled with ghostly radio static and empty auction blocks. I skirted the workshop the next morning. Could not face the Philco, its quiet disapproval. Instead, I drifted to the kitchen, brewed coffee, and sat by the window, lost in thought. Outside, the world pulsed with vigor. Birds sang from the branches, squirrels danced on the lawn, sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting the grass in shifting patterns. A perfect day wasted on despair. Enough, I growled, the coffee cup clattering against the table. I won't let a damn radio defeat me. I marched back to the workshop, determined to reverse the tide. Maybe the Philco was a dud, but that didn't mark the end. Other radios beckoned, challenges awaited, victories remained to be claimed. Still, as I crossed the threshold, my gaze drifted to the computer screen. 0 bids. The lonely Philco simply sat there, mute, silently, pleading. It deserved a good home, and I had to find it one. The clock was still ticking. Sunrise in Japan. A collector's call. The silence after listing that Philco on eBay had been deafening. Days crawled by, each one amplifying the nagging voice in my head that whispered, "You're washed up, Joe." But then, it happened. The email chime on my laptop nearly sent my coffee flying. "Your item has sold," it screamed. I fumbled with the mouse, my heart hammering like a loose piston. $350? Nope. 700. 700 damn dollars. Someone didn't just want that Philco. They needed it. "Maria!" I bellowed. "Get in here. You won't believe this." Maria shuffled in, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "What is it, Joe? You sound like you won the lottery." "Better," I grinned, pointing at the screen. "That Philco? Sold. For double the price." Her eyes widened. $700? Joe, that's wonderful. She squeezed my hand, and the warmth in her touch chased away the last vestiges of doubt. "See? I told you. You're a master craftsman." "Damn right I am," I chuckled, already thinking about the possibilities. "But this ain't just about me being good, Maria. This is about someone recognizing it." My curiosity piqued. I clicked on the buyer's profile. Haruki Tanaka, Japan. "Haruki Tanaka," I muttered, typing his name into the search bar. The internet, that thing I usually cursed for making everything too easy, actually came in handy for once. Turns out, Haruki Tanaka wasn't just some random collector. He was a serious enthusiast, a guy who curated a museum-worthy collection of vintage radios. Articles popped up in obscure audio magazines, showcasing his meticulously restored sets and his deep knowledge of radio history. One article even quoted him, "A vintage radio is not merely a device, it is a time capsule, a vessel carrying the voices and stories of generations past. To restore one is to honor those voices and preserve their legacy." Damn, the guy was practically a poet, and he appreciated what I did. A wave of pride washed over me, hotter than the soldering iron I used on those old tubes. This wasn't just about the money, it was about validation. It was about someone, halfway across the world, recognizing the value of my work, the hours of sweat and frustration I poured into bringing that old Philco back to life. "Maria," I said, my voice brimming with excitement, "this changes things." The next morning, after shipping the Philco with enough bubble wrap to protect it from a nuclear blast, I headed down to Sal's Electronics Surplus. Sal, a wiry guy who looked like he'd been electrocuted one too many times, greeted me with a raised eyebrow. "Back already, Joe? Thought you were going to retire on that eBay money." "Retire?" I scoffed. "Sal, I'm just getting started. And that ain't eBay money, that's seed money. I need to reinvest." I spent the morning rummaging through Sal's dusty shelves, my eyes scanning for potential projects. I picked up a beautiful 1940 Zenith console radio with an Art Deco design that made my heart sing. It was rough around the edges, missing a knob and covered in a thick layer of grime, but I saw the potential. "How much for the Zenith, Sal?" I asked, already picturing it gleaming in my workshop. Sal stroked his chin. "That old thing? $100, Joe. But it's a project, you know. Needs a lot of work." "That's the point, Sal," I grinned, peeling off a $100 bill. "That's the whole damn point." I also snagged a box of NOS, new old stock, vacuum tubes, a set of high-quality capacitors, and a vintage tube tester that looked like it belonged in a Cold War-era laboratory. My workbench was about to get a serious upgrade. Back in my garage, surrounded by the comforting smell of solder and beeswax polish, I felt a surge of energy. The sale of the Philco, and the validation it brought, had lit a fire under me. I wasn't just fixing radios. I was building something. A legacy, maybe. Or maybe just a way to keep myself from going crazy sitting around all day. Either way, it felt good. I started on the Zenith right away, carefully cleaning the cabinet and assessing the damage. The speaker cloth was torn, the veneer was peeling, and the chassis was coated in a thick layer of dust. But beneath the grime, I could see the beauty waiting to be unleashed. As I worked, I thought about Haruki Tanaka, the collector in Japan. I imagined him carefully unpacking the Philco, admiring the craftsmanship, and maybe even tuning it to a station playing some old jazz records. It gave me a sense of satisfaction, knowing that my work was being appreciated, that I was contributing something of value to the world. Later that evening, Maria came into the garage carrying a plate of cookies and a glass of milk.
"You're still out here, Joe? It's getting late."
"Just getting started, Maria," I said without looking up from the Zenith. "This old girl's got a lot of life left in her." She smiled. "Just like you, Joe. Just like you." I glanced at her, a grin spreading across my face. Damn right. The next day, I decided to try something new. I'd been so focused on the restoration itself that I hadn't really thought about the marketing side of things. But with the extra money, I figured I could afford to experiment. I called up my grandson, Michael, the one who was always glued to his phone. He was a whiz with computers and social media, stuff that made my head spin. "Michael," I said, "Grandpa needs your help. I want to get more people looking at my radios." He sighed. "Grandpa, I told you, nobody cares about old radios. It's all about streaming now." "Humor me, kid," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm paying." For a surprisingly reasonable fee, Michael agreed to set up a proper website for Mancini's Vintage Radios, complete with high-quality photos of my work and detailed descriptions of each set. He even convinced me to start an Instagram account, posting pictures of my progress on the Zenith. I resisted at first. Instagram? Pictures of radios? Sounded ridiculous. But then, I started getting likes and comments. People were actually interested. Some were even asking about buying radios. The world was changing, I realized. And maybe, just maybe, I could change with it. But one thing would never change: my dedication to craftsmanship, my passion for bringing these old machines back to life. That was the heart of my business, the thing that set me apart. And that, I knew, was something worth more than all the streaming services in the world. The cute hobby inspection. "Time to unwind, Dad. Retirement beckons." Sarah's voice, that soothing cadence she reserved for patients, hung in the air. Registered nurse indeed, and with a well-timed bedside manner for her own father. David, ever the practical accountant, offered a solemn nod of accord. Lisa, with characteristic warmth, just beamed, likely envisioning Dad basking on some sun-drenched shore, a fruity cocktail in hand. They'd staged an intervention, the trio materializing at his doorstep like a SWAT team dispensing concern instead of warrants. It was Saturday, prime tinkering time, and he was deep in the innards of the Zenith, a web of wires and tubes blossoming across his workbench. "Unwind?" He scoffed, swiping at a smudge of grime clinging to his cheek. "Idleness is for folks 6 feet under. I'm engaged." Sarah's perfectly arched brows climbed higher. "Engaged in what, precisely?" "We simply want you to enjoy yourself. You've earned it, Dad." David, never one to mince words, added, "That cruise we discussed? All-inclusive? You and Mom deserve the pampering." Lisa, perched on a stool like a vibrant hummingbird in her rainbow-hued scarf, offered a gentler approach. "Exactly, Dad. Soak up some rays. Let someone else handle the day-to-day grind for once." Surrounded, outflanked by their solicitude, he sighed, carefully placing the soldering iron aside. "Time for a strategic parlay." All right, he conceded, hands raised in mock defeat. "Allow me to illustrate what occupies my relaxation hours." He swept a hand across the garage, now surprisingly orderly thanks to Marie's subtle nudges coupled with his own determination. His workbench, formerly a chaotic landscape of components, now radiated organization, each tool residing in its rightful spot. The Philco, now gleaming with renewed splendor, graced a shelf, a testament to his artistry. And then there was the Zenith, a colossal edifice of wood and glass, humming with untold potential. Sarah, her voice tinged with hesitant interest, spoke first. "Dad, this space is remarkably decluttered." David circled the Zenith warily, his gaze narrowed in appraisal. "A substantial radio, Dad, its acquisition cost, if you recall." Lisa, ever the optimist, flitted over to the Philco, her fingers tracing its polished contours. "It's exquisite, Dad. You have such a knack for these things." He allowed himself a small, triumphant smile. "It's more than just organization and a knack, Liz. I'm reviving these relics, returning them to their former glory. And there's a healthy market for them." Sarah exchanged a quick, telling glance with David. The unspoken message hung heavy in the air. Dad's finally cracked. Officially lost his marbles. "A diverting pursuit, Dad," Sarah offered, her tone carefully balanced. "But is it genuinely viable?" David affirmed with a nod. "Yes, Dad. We're simply concerned about your savings. The cruise remains an option, remember." "A pursuit?" he bristled, his spine straightening. "This isn't some frivolous hobby, Sarah. It's a venture. Mancini's Vintage Radios. And it's thriving." He swiftly retrieved his phone, navigating to the eBay application. "Recall that Philco I was toiling over? Sold it to a gentleman in Japan, Haruki Tanaka. Paid handsomely, I might add." He brandished the confirmation email, the PayPal notification, the whole financial dance. Lisa gasped, wide-eyed. "Dad, that's fantastic." Sarah and David, however, remained rooted in their skepticism. Their expressions remained unchanged, stoic. "Splendid, Dad," Sarah said, her voice retaining its measured caution. "However, a solitary transaction does not a business make. And the investment of time, Dad? Are you not exhausted? Should you not be resting?" David crossed his arms, a picture of unwavering practicality. "Furthermore, Dad, returns? If Mr. Tanaka is dissatisfied? You are liable, of course." He resisted the urge to roll his eyes. They just weren't comprehending the essence of things. They observed an aging man fiddling with antique radios, a charming but ultimately pointless pastime. They failed to perceive the fervor, the expertise, the profound fulfillment derived from breathing vitality into something relegated to oblivion. They failed to see the embryonic enterprise. "Listen," he said, striving for calm. "Your concern is valued, truly. However, I am not some feeble old man requiring bubble wrap and a one-way ticket to Shady Pines. I am capable. I am resourceful, and I am experiencing a renaissance." He turned back to the Zenith, seizing the soldering iron. "Now, if you'll grant me leave, I have a radio demanding resurrection, and a website awaiting design, and an Instagram account to, well, my grandson's tackling that particular beast." They stood immobile, the trio regarding him with a confluence of perplexity, solicitude, and a subtle undercurrent of something else, perhaps, just perhaps, a nascent glimmer of respect. "Very well, Dad," Sarah finally conceded, her voice softening a fraction. "Just exercise caution, won't you? And the cruise remains on the table." "We adore you, Dad," Lisa interjected, offering a fleeting embrace. David simply nodded, his expression a closed book. "Contact us, should you require anything, Dad." Then they departed, leaving him solitary in his garage, enveloped by his radios, his implements, and his aspirations. He followed their retreat, a ghost of a smile gracing his lips. They considered this a sweet hobby, a means of occupying his time and keeping him out of mischief. They assumed he was simply filling the hours. They were profoundly mistaken. He pivoted back to the Zenith, his fingers itching to resume his labor. He grasped the soldering iron, its familiar weight, a comforting presence in his hand. "Sweet hobby, is it?" he murmured, a spark igniting in his eye. "Just you bide your time. Golden Age Audio, broadcasting a dream. Retire gracefully," they'd urged, their faces etched with the kind of apprehension that suggested I was teetering on the brink of needing assistance with everything. "You've earned a rest, Dad." "Earned it?" I practically patented the concept. Half a century wrestling with engines, my hands eternally imprinted with grime, inhaling gas fumes as if they were vintage brandy. I'd accumulated enough leisure to purchase a Pacific Atoll, not vegetate before the boob tube, glued to golf. So, I gave them the expected platitudes. A nod, a wan smile, a promise to take it easy. The instant their brake lights faded, I dove back into the garage. The tang of flux and lacquer a far more seductive fragrance than herbal tea. What I craved was purpose, something to demonstrate. I wasn't just a geriatric fossil awaiting the knackery. Cigars? Passé. A handyman service? My joints would file a grievance. Flipping cars. Appealing, sure, but I desired something different. A quieter pursuit. Then the idea resonated, clear as a struck tuning fork. The radios. For years, they slumbered in the attic, remnants of a bygone age. My father's, my grandfather's, each one a monument to an era when quality reigned, when objects were crafted for longevity, not discarded with the next software upgrade. I began with a 39 Philco, a veritable queen of the airwaves. The cabinet bore scratches, the tubes were lifeless, yet beneath the surface, I sensed possibilities. Hours melted away as I meticulously cleaned, rewired, cajoling the old dame back to life. The thrill that pulsed through me when that initial static-laced note echoed through the garage was more satisfying than any pension payout. Soon, word trickled through the neighborhood. Folks were delivering their own forgotten treasures, a majestic cathedral speaker, a zenith transoceanic. Each a challenge, an enigma, a fragment of history yearning to be awakened. It was then the truth dawned. I wasn't merely repairing radios. I was resurrecting memories. The kids, bless their naivete, considered it a pastime. It keeps him occupied. I overheard my daughter remark to my wife. Occupied? This was a bloody cultural revival. Thus, I decided to formalize the venture. I needed a moniker, a brand identity, something that captured the essence of my work. After considerable deliberation, punctuated by suggestions from my better half, I landed on Golden Age Audio. It possessed a certain gravitas, a hint of sophistication. The subsequent step involved, well, the internet. Now, I'm no digital native. My idea of surfing involved a fishing pole and a frosty beverage. Still, even I understood that reaching a broader audience required a website. My grandson, glued to his devices, offered assistance. I brushed him off. "I've got this," I announced, chest puffed. How complicated can it be? Famous last words indeed. Turns out, creating a website bears little resemblance to fine-tuning an engine. There were things called domains and hosting and HTML, terms that sounded like a robot dialect. Days were spent hunched over my computer, peering at the screen, navigating a labyrinth of tutorials and forums. My fingers, accustomed to the grip of wrenches and pliers, bungled on the keyboard. My language grew saltier than a sailor's. Nevertheless, I pushed on. I absorbed concepts like responsive design, search engine optimization, and hashtag etiquette. I even managed to upload images without causing a system meltdown. Gradually, painstakingly, Golden Age Audio materialized. The visuals, I knew, had to be perfect. Each radio merited showcasing in all its splendor, emphasizing the lustrous wood, the intricate details, the sheer artistry of its construction. But images alone wouldn't suffice. Compelling descriptions were essential, those that would stir the imagination, that would transport people back when radio commanded the airwaves. This is where my years of tinkering, of listening, of grasping the very soul of these contraptions became invaluable. I wrote of each radio's lineage, its distinct qualities, the stories it whispered. I evoked the gentle glow of the vacuum tubes, the resonant, full sound, the sensation of cradling a piece of history. This ain't just a radio. I'd type, fingers flying. This is a portal. Close your eyes, spin the dial, and let it whisk you away. I poured my heart into every phrase, every nuance. It was crucial for people to recognize these weren't just antiquated devices, but works of art. Finally, after weeks of labor, the website stood ready. Golden Age Audio was online. I clicked publish, and a surge of anticipation washed through me. It was out there, in the electronic void, awaiting discovery. I summoned my wife to the office. "Have a look," I said, gesturing to the screen. She studied the website, a slight smile gracing her lips. "It's lovely, Joe," she said. "Very professional." "Lovely?" I scoffed. "It's a masterpiece. It's going to be huge. They'll be queuing down the block to get their hands on these radios." She chuckled, patting my arm. "That's my Joe," she said. "Always optimistic." Optimistic? I was practically prescient. I knew this would succeed. I could feel it in my gut. That night, sleep eluded me. I monitored the website, refreshing the page, anticipating the deluge of orders. Nothing. The following day, stillness. Doubt began to gnaw, like a corroded screw refusing to turn. Perhaps the kids were correct. Maybe I was too long in the tooth for this. Perhaps I should confine myself to tending roses and lawn bowling. Then, late in the afternoon, an email appeared. An order. A customer from California sought to purchase the Philco. The very one I had painstakingly revived, the one that had ignited this entire wild pursuit. I reread the email to ensure I wasn't hallucinating. Then, a bellow of elation erupted, nearly cracking the window panes. "I told you!" I yelled to my wife, who rushed into the room, eyes wide with apprehension. "I told you it would work!" She beamed, shaking her head. "All right, Joe," she conceded. "You proved me wrong." But this was just the prelude. Golden Age Audio was on the air, transmitting a dream. And I had a hunch that the signal was about to amplify dramatically. Local legend goes viral. Take it easy, Pop. Embrace the golden years. The kids meant well, God bless them. But inactivity chafed. Stagnation wasn't in my nature. Cigarillos and checkerboards? Too cliché. A freelance fix-it guy. Today's generation watched a YouTube clip and fancied themselves pros. Restoring vintage rides? Appealing, yet I craved something more, resonant. Then it struck me, radios. Not the plastic disposable kind, but the hefty vacuum tube wonders that whispered tales of yesteryear, the very kind my grandpa cherished. And so, Golden Age Audio flickered into existence. Crafting the website was akin to wrestling an octopus in molasses. These digital natives spoke a foreign tongue. I grappled with code and layouts late into the night, fueled by tepid coffee and unwavering resolve. Finally, it went live. GoldenAgeAudio.com. Visually challenged, perhaps, but all mine. That initial order, pure vindication. Proof I wasn't just some codger whiling away the hours in my garage. Now, a week later, a young journalist, notepad clutched tight, sat amidst my organized chaos, her brow furrowed in curiosity. "Mr. Mancini," she began, "your novel retirement activity is quite intriguing." I chuckled, a low rumble in my chest. Novel? I'm simply resurrecting quality. These radios were built to endure, not destined for the landfill after a year. I swept a hand towards the gleaming metalwork of a Philco Cathedral radio. This beauty? Rolled off the line in 34. Still sings a sweet tune. Sarah, from the Willow Creek Weekly, seemed harmless enough. I recounted my history. Growing up captivated by radio broadcasts with my grandfather, my years turning wrenches as a mechanic, the deeply satisfying alchemy of restoration. I demonstrated how I meticulously recapped each set, testing every glass-encased tube with my trusty ICO 666. "It transcends mere repair," I elaborated, my voice tinged with emotion. "It's about safeguarding a piece of our collective past. These radios, they echo with the voices of history." Families huddled together listening to FDR's fireside chats, the infectious rhythms of swing music, the urgent pronouncements of wartime news. Can't capture that with a Bluetooth speaker. Sarah scribbled intently, her eyes alight. She was hooked, line and sinker. The article hit the stands that Friday. "Willow Creek's Radio Revivalist," the headline proclaimed. A photograph showed me, unexpectedly distinguished, peering at a radio with my jeweler's loop. The initial response was localized. Folks stopping me at the Piggly Wiggly, slapping me on the shoulder. "Way to go, Joe! Knew you still had it in you?" Even the kids seemed impressed, though they tried to hide it under a veil of parental concern. Then, Saturday morning, pandemonium erupted. My phone began to vibrate incessantly. Emails inundated my inbox. My website, well, it crumbled under the pressure. "Dad, what's happening?" Maria's voice was sharp with anxiety. "Your site is down. It's showing an error 503, service unavailable." I frowned, bewildered. "Error what? Now?" I ambled over to my computer, peering at the screen. "It was functioning perfectly yesterday." "It's likely overload," Tony interjected, a touch of awe coloring his tone. Did you go viral or something?" Viral? The word sounded like a skin rash. Yet, as the day unfolded, I understood it perfectly. Sarah's piece had been picked up by an online news aggregator, then shared and reshared across every social media platform. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of Golden Age audio. Orders flooded in from across the nation. Requests for bespoke restorations, inquiries about obscure models, even a couple of overtures to buy the entire operation. My modest website, the one I'd birthed through sheer willpower and a colorful vocabulary, was drowning. It was akin to bailing out the Titanic with a teacup. That afternoon, Tony, ever the family tech guru, arrived looking slightly embarrassed. "Dad," he said, "you require a proper website, one designed to withstand this kind of surge, and probably some sophisticated e-commerce tools." "E-commerce, eh?" I grumbled. "Sounds pricey." "I can assist," he offered, his eyes sparkling with a blend of pride and, could it be, envy? "I have a contact who specializes in this field." I regarded him warily. "And what will this contact cost me?" He shrugged noncommittally. "We can negotiate terms. Perhaps I could inherit that Zenith Trans-Oceanic you brought back from the dead." I chuckled, a hearty sound. "Possibly, but you're still doing the dishes for the next month." The following weeks were a blur. I hired a local college student to help manage the digital side of things. I expanded my workshop, transforming the spare bedroom into a dedicated testing facility. I even delegated some of the simpler tasks to a pair of retired engineers from the senior center. Golden Age Audio was thriving. And I was busier than a one-armed paperhanger. One evening, while seated at my workbench, meticulously soldering a resistor onto a chassis, I considered the financial implications. I reached for my trusty calculator and began to crunch the numbers. The parts, the manpower, the shipping expenses, they all added up. And, after subtracting the outlays, a remarkably substantial profit remained. I repeated the calculations, just to be certain. Then I grinned, a wide, satisfied expression. I was earning more restoring vintage radios than my collective offspring made at their fancy white-collar jobs. Maria, the attorney, with her billable hours and tension headaches. Tony, the marketing maven, with his power lunches and corporate speak. Even my youngest, Lisa, the artist, who fashioned jewelry and peddled them at craft markets. I chuckled quietly. They deemed me past my prime. They'd envisioned me playing bingo and knitting afghans. Well, I'd proven them wrong. A few weeks later, we gathered at my place for Sunday dinner. The air, as always, was saturated with the fragrant invitation of my signature marinara. "So, Dad," Maria ventured, a few glasses of Pinot Grigio loosening her tongue, "how's the radio endeavor progressing?" "Wonderfully," I answered, carefully suppressing any hint of smugness. "I'm booked solid for months. Just recruited another pair of hands." "Wow," Tony remarked, his eyebrows arching in surprise. "That's impressive." Lisa, never one to mince words, got right to the point. "Are you actually clearing a profit?" I savored a prolonged sip of wine, relishing the moment. "Let's just say I won't be hitting you kids up for a loan anytime soon." An expectant hush fell over the table. Then, Maria broke the silence, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Dad, do you think maybe you could offer some advice on striking out on my own?" I'm growing weary of punching the clock for someone else. I leaned back in my chair, a playful glint in my eye. Retire? I'm just getting warmed up. TikTok tutorials and Hollywood calls. Relish your golden years, they'd said. Easy for them to say. About as appealing as a jammed window crank relishes being stuck. My offspring, bless their hopeful hearts, imagined a life of leisure. Witnessing my efforts to revive that antique Philco, exhumed from Mrs. Henderson's sweltering attic, likely triggered alarms. Dad, shouldn't you be on a green, traveling the world, anything but dabbling in electronics? Sarah had inquired, her nose twitching in distaste. Golf? I'd sooner tangle with a wildcat. However, soldering? Now, that presented a mental workout. And challenge, I'd come to realize across 8 decades, served as my personal fountain of youth. I dismissed their well-meant prodding, dedicating myself to my passion. From my chaotic garage, Golden Age audio arose, a sanctuary for sounds time had forgotten. The Cigar Emporium idea fizzled faster than a faulty fuse. The HOA would have launched a full-scale revolt. Home repair service? My knees offered louder complaints than a dial-up struggling for connection. Restoring vintage cars? Too gritty, not enough gratification. But radios? Radios captivated. They represented tangible history, narratives echoing from glass-encased components. The initial period unfolded quietly. A few inquisitive neighbors, primarily seeking aid with their modern wireless speakers, which I promptly declined. Then the feature in the local gazette appeared. Michael, my tech-adept son, conjured a website. And then, kaboom. Requests flooded in. Restorations, servicing, customers yearning to reclaim a sliver of yesteryear. I floundered amidst capacitors and whisker-thin wires. I needed assistance. But not just any pair of hands. I required someone fluent in the digital vernacular, someone capable of corralling the technological leviathan Michael had unleashed. Enter Kevin Chen. A slight fellow, barely past adolescence, with a fervent glint behind oversized spectacles. He responded to my advertisement. Assistant sought, radio buff, digital skills a plus, and I approached with hesitancy. He possessed the air of a scholar, not a garage grease monkey. So, I began, settling into my squeaky chair. Familiar with radios, are you? Kevin adjusted his glasses. Not particularly, sir, but I assembled my first computer at 12. And I'm proficient in 5 coding languages. Coding? Languages? Utterly foreign concepts. Can you remedy a short? He faltered. I'm a fast learner. Adequate. I observed a spark, a keenness to immerse himself. Fine, kid, you're in. Starting salary, on-the-job training. The generational chasm yawned wider than a country mile. I'd elucidate the nuances of a feedback circuit, and he'd stare blankly. Conversely, he'd attempt to explain SEO tactics, and my attention would drift away. Regardless, we functioned as a unit. He overhauled the website, rendering it more polished than a freshly waxed record. He even coerced me into social media. TikTok, Mr. Mancini, he declared, brandishing his cell phone. Brief clips, people eat them up. TikTok? Sounded like indigestion. However, I deferred to Kevin's judgment. He recorded me at work, detailing the operation of a vacuum tube, the satisfaction derived from breathing new life into a classic receiver. I felt foolish, hamming it up for the lens, striving for a semblance of coolness in my soiled coveralls. Okay, Mr. Mancini, now deliver the line. Stay tuned for more vintage vibes. Kevin coached, his fingers dancing across the screen. Vintage. What now? I muttered, yet complied. And, remarkably, it became a sensation. Viewers commented, shared, posed questions. Suddenly, Golden Age audio represented the epitome of cool. Then, the phone chimed. An area code unfamiliar to me. Joseph Mancini? A mellifluous voice inquired. David Miller, set decorator for Paramount Pictures speaking. My pulse quickened. Paramount Pictures? I suspected a practical joke perpetrated by Michael. We're filming a period piece, set during the 1940s. Miller proceeded. We require authentic radios, a considerable number. And yours embody the genuine article. He stipulated approximately 20 radios, diverse models, all fully operational. He proposed a figure that nearly dislodged my false teeth, and subsequently uttered the words that almost caused me to drop the receiver. We'd also be delighted to have you appear in a minor role, portraying a radio technician naturally. A cameo? In a Hollywood production? I nearly lost my voice. Me, Joseph Mancini, the retiree presumed to be hitting golf balls. I maintained composure. Years spent negotiating at swap meets had imparted some valuable skills. Well, Mr. Miller, I responded, deliberately extending my syllables. My radios are invaluable relics, and my time possesses even greater worth. We bartered. I extracted additional compensation, a first-class airline ticket to Los Angeles, and assurance that I would have the chance to tinker with the radios on the set. The subsequent weeks passed in a blur. Kevin oversaw the website, responded to inquiries, and even launched an Instagram account showcasing before and after images of my restorations. I occupied myself with locating radios, refurbishing them, and packing them for transport to Hollywood. Standing on that soundstage, enveloped in bright illumination and surrounded by glamorous individuals, I experienced a surge of exhilaration I hadn't encountered in decades. The director, a young woman sporting vibrant red locks, even solicited my perspective regarding the positioning of a specific radio. My scene was brief, consisting of a handful of lines, adjusting a knob, projecting an air of wisdom and insight. However, it sufficed. I became a participant in something larger, something magical. Back home, the orders persisted. The Hollywood Association had bestowed a fresh degree of prestige upon Golden Age audio. I was earning more income than ever before, surpassing even Michael and Sarah combined. One evening, Sarah visited, a preoccupied expression etched upon her face. "Dad," she confessed, "my business is struggling. I was hoping you might offer some guidance." I leaned back in my seat, a contented smile spreading across my countenance. "Retire? I'm just gaining momentum. Besides, Grandpa always knows best, sweetheart." Gramps knows best. "Retire and relax, Dad," Sarah cooed, the saccharine tone a familiar irritant. David echoed with talk of judicious investments and asset protection. Lisa, bless her heart, offered a blank stare, probably envisioning me in hemp pants at a meditation retreat. Only Martha, my rock for 50 years, squeezed my hand, a silent endorsement of my autonomy radiating from her touch. Retire? To what exactly? The shuffleboard circuit? I lasted 3 weeks before the walls threatened to close in. My fingers ached to manipulate, to mend, to conjure. Those radios weren't mere junk heaps. They resonated with an era when durability was prized, when artistry meant something. Golden Age audio was thriving. The film Echoes of Yesterday had exceeded all forecasts, and suddenly everyone craved a relic of bygone times. My tiny backyard shed was insufficient. Expansion was inevitable. I located an abandoned lot a few blocks away, a former filling station, and submitted an offer. David nearly sputtered his morning coffee when he scrutinized the papers. "Dad, that's a considerable outlay. Have you even conducted any market research?" "Market research?" I scoffed. "Son, I embody the market. I intuit what people desire. They crave substance. They want authenticity." Martha, ever the pragmatist, suggested, "Joe, perhaps allow Sarah a glance at your prospectus." Sarah, the marketing maven, descended upon my humble setup like a whirlwind through a museum. Spreadsheets proliferated, projections materialized, and I mostly nodded and mumbled, attempting to decipher the jargon. To be fair, some of her ideas held merit. A polished website, a viable social media presence beyond Kevin's fumbling attempts at Instagram radio portraits. She even floated a logo. I nearly choked when she unveiled her designs. The revamped workshop was my sanctuary, spacious enough to actually turn around, something Martha cheered, and boasting proper ventilation, liberating me from soldering-induced headaches. I even erected a proper spray booth. Best of all, I was hiring. The news percolated through the retiree grapevine. Men who devoted their lives to wrenching engines, stringing wires, crafting furniture, they all sought purpose. A little compensation didn't hurt either. Now, beyond mere radio restoration, I was contributing. Providing a haven where skills cultivated over decades weren't deemed obsolete, where experienced hands still possessed value. Old man Hemmings, a retired electrician, could wire a chassis blindfolded. Mrs. Peterson, a former dressmaker, displayed wizardry when reconstructing the fabric coverings. Even cantankerous Earl, who'd managed a scrapyard, proved surprisingly adept at polishing chrome. The radios were exiting the premises at a brisk pace. The echoes of yesterday phenomenon reigned supreme. Collectors, nostalgia enthusiasts, even trendsetters seeking a throwback aesthetic, they all coveted a slice of golden age audio. The children materialized for Sunday supper, their countenances a study in bewilderment mixed with fascination. Sarah positively vibrated with merchandising concepts. David adopted a tone of measured optimism, discussing scalability and brand extension. Lisa snapped photos incessantly, anointing it artisanal documentation. "So, Dad," David initiated, clearing his throat theatrically. "How's the, venture progressing?" I drew a leisurely sip of coffee, savoring the moment. "Progressing splendidly, son. Splendidly." "We were contemplating," Sarah interjected, "perhaps assisting you with the fiscal management, streamlining the workflows." "And I could investigate some growth capital opportunities," David appended, his eyes gleaming with avarice. I raised a hand in restraint. "Hold your horses, children. Your solicitations are appreciated, but I believe I have matters under control." Martha gifted me with a knowing expression. She anticipated the inevitable. "Under control how, Dad?" Sarah pressed, the sugar frosting cracking from her tone. "Are you even turning a profit?" I reclined in my chair, a slow smile stretching across my visage. "Profit? Shall we just stipulate that, over the preceding 12 months, my income has eclipsed your collective annual earnings?" The ensuing silence was palpable. Sarah's jaw hung agape. David sputtered, nearly choking on his Merlot. Lisa regarded me with unadulterated amazement. Martha beamed, gently squeezing my hand. But how?" David stammered, flustered. "Vintage radios, son," I pronounced, my voice subtly imbued with pride. "Apparently, people are prepared to remit a premium for excellence, for artistry, for a piece of antiquity." Sarah, the consummate pragmatist, regained composure first. "Okay, Dad, that's excellent. But you can't sustain this pace. You must decelerate, prioritize your well-being." "Decelerate?" I chuckled, rising to my feet. "I am merely gaining momentum." I grasped my keys, bestowed a kiss upon Martha's cheek, and proceeded toward the garage. The guttural rumble of the Mustang's engine ruptured the stunned quietude as I reversed from the driveway. As I braked at the intersection and glimpsed their expressions in my rearview mirror, Sarah's incredulity, David's covetousness, Lisa's sheer wonder, I couldn't suppress a grin. Time to ignite the radio and set sail. After all, perhaps Grandpa knew a thing or two.